For many people, life seems to slow down after the age of 25. Not because opportunities disappear, but because internal momentum quietly fades. In your early years, growth is built into the system. You are surrounded by structure, feedback, and external pressure that forces development. School, exams, social transitions, and career entry points constantly push you into new environments. But once that structure dissolves, progress becomes optional. And this is where most people stall. The next level requires intentional change, not automatic progression. After 25, the brain begins to prioritize efficiency and comfort over exploration. Habits solidify, identity stabilizes. You start repeating what already works instead of risking what might work better. This shift feels subtle, even responsible, but it carries a hidden cost. When your life becomes predictable, growth slows. Many people mistake stability for maturity, not realizing that they have stopped challenging the assumptions that once drove improvement. Fear also changes form. It no longer looks like fear of failure, it looks like fear of disruption. You become more invested in protecting what you've built than in expanding what you could become. Responsibilities increase, which makes experimentation feel dangerous rather than exciting. As a result, ambition becomes quieter, safer, and eventually dormant. People still dream, but they no longer act with urgency. They wait for clarity, confidence, or perfect conditions that never arrive. Over time, this waiting turns into resignation. The next level remains visible but unreachable, not because of lack of ability, but because the internal drive to evolve has been replaced by the desire to maintain. This is why so many people plateau after 25. They don't fail dramatically. They simply stop moving forward with intention. Another major reason people never reach their next level after 25 is that their identity becomes fixed around who they already are. Earlier in life, experimentation feels natural. You try different roles, behaviors, beliefs, and directions with less attachment to outcomes. But as you age, identity hardens. You begin to define yourself by your past choices, current skills, and existing reputation. This creates an invisible ceiling. Growth beyond your current level now feels like a threat to your sense of self. Changing direction risks embarrassment. Admitting ignorance feels humiliating. Starting over feels irresponsible. So instead of evolving, people protect an outdated version of themselves. They unconsciously ask, how do I succeed without changing who I am? A question that guarantees stagnation. At the same time, the feedback loop that once guided improvement weakens. Fewer people challenge you honestly. Fewer environments demand adaptation. You are no longer graded, corrected, or pushed unless you seek it out. Without friction, your skills plateau. Comfort becomes the default. This comfort is deceptive because it feels earned. You tell yourself that you deserve ease after years of effort. But growth does not operate on fairness. It operates on friction. Without resistance, the mind stops stretching. Over time, curiosity fades, risk tolerance shrinks, and learning slows. You still consume information, but you stop transforming through it. This is when people confuse motion with progress. They stay busy, but nothing fundamentally changes. The next level requires shedding old identities, not decorating them. It requires becoming a beginner again in some area of life which most people resist because it threatens their sense of competence. So they stay where they are not because they can't move forward, but because moving forward would require becoming someone they don't yet recognize. A deeper, less obvious reason people stall after 25 is that their relationship with discomfort changes. Earlier in life, discomfort is expected. You assume confusion, insecurity, and awkwardness are part of growth. But as you get older, discomfort starts to feel like a sign that something is wrong. You believe you should have figured things out by now. This belief quietly poisons progress. When learning feels slow or challenging, you interpret it as evidence that you are off track, not that you are growing. As a result, you retreat to what feels familiar. You optimize what you already know instead of entering spaces where you might struggle. This avoidance compounds over time. Skills that are not used atrophy. Curiosity narrows. Your world becomes smaller even if your responsibilities grow. Another factor is that consequences feel heavier. Failure no longer feels like a lesson. It feels like a setback with real costs: financial, social, emotional. This makes risk-taking feel irresponsible rather than necessary, but growth always involves temporary instability. When you avoid instability at all costs, you also avoid transformation. The next level demands tolerance for looking unskilled, uncertain, and unfinished. Most people would rather remain competent at a lower level than risk incompetence on the way to a higher one. This choice feels safe in the short term, but it quietly locks them into a life that stops expanding. Over time, the discomfort of stagnation replaces the discomfort of growth, but by then, momentum is harder to rebuild. This is why reaching the next level after 25 is less about intelligence or opportunity, and more about your willingness to regularly put yourself back into situations where you don't yet belong. There is also a powerful social force that keeps people from reaching their next level after 25. Unspoken comparison and invisible expectations. As you move deeper into adulthood, your peer group begins to diverge. Some people advance quickly, others settle early, and many quietly struggle while projecting stability. This creates a distorted reference point. Instead of measuring growth against your own potential, you measure it against the perceived progress of others. If you appear to be doing well enough compared to your circle, urgency disappears. You stop asking hard questions because socially nothing seems wrong. At the same time, social roles become heavier. You are no longer just an individual. You are a professional, a partner, a provider, or a role model. These labels create pressure to appear consistent and reliable. Growth, however, often looks messy before it looks impressive. When your environment rewards predictability, you learn to hide uncertainty and suppress ambition that might disrupt the image others have of you. Over time, this leads to self-censorship. You stop voicing ideas that feel premature. You delay moves that might confuse people. You choose paths that make sense to others instead of paths that feel meaningful to you. This quiet conformity is one of the most common reasons people plateau. It doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like being reasonable. But reasonableness is often the enemy of transformation. The next level almost always requires a period where your choices are misunderstood. If you are unwilling to be temporarily misjudged, you will stay permanently underestimated even by yourself. Ultimately, the reason most people never reach their next level after 25 is not a lack of potential, but a lack of deliberate self-reinvention. Growth at this stage of life is no longer accidental. It must be chosen repeatedly and consciously. You have to create your own pressure, your own challenges, and your own feedback loops. No one is coming to push you forward. The environment will gladly let you stay exactly where you are. Reaching the next level means questioning routines that feel productive but produce no change. It means designing your life around development instead of maintenance. This often requires letting go of certainty in exchange for possibility. You may need to outgrow relationships, redefine success, or step away from paths that once made sense. These decisions are uncomfortable because they break continuity with your past, but the future does not reward loyalty to outdated versions of yourself. People who continue to evolve after 25 share one defining trait. They treat life as an ongoing experiment, not a finished identity. They remain students, not experts. They intentionally seek environments that stretch them and feedback that challenges them. Over time, this compounds into a different trajectory. While others slowly solidify, they continue to expand. The next level is not reached through intensity or hustle alone. It is reached through the courage to repeatedly start over in small, strategic ways. Those who embrace this never truly plateau. They simply enter new phases of growth, again and again, long after most people have decided that who they are is who they will remain. What most people don't realize is that after 25, progress stops being driven by motivation and starts being driven by systems. Earlier in life, bursts of inspiration are enough to carry you forward because novelty is everywhere. But later, motivation becomes unreliable. Energy fluctuates. Confidence comes and goes. If your growth depends on feeling ready, you will almost never move. People who reach their next level design lives that move them forward, even when they feel uninspired. They build routines that expose weaknesses instead of hiding them. They schedule discomfort the same way others schedule comfort. This is where most people fail, not because they didn't want more, but because they rely on emotion to create change instead of structure. Over time, their goals stay abstract while their habits stay familiar. Days blur together and years pass without a clear shift in trajectory. The next level requires boring consistency applied to uncomfortable areas. It requires doing small, unglamorous actions long before results are visible. Most people quit here because it doesn't feel like progress yet. But this is exactly where real transformation happens. When effort becomes identity independent, when you act regardless of how you feel, you regain upward momentum. Growth after 25 is not dramatic. It is quiet, disciplined, and deeply intentional. And this is why so few people reach it. Not because it is impossible, but because it asks for a level of self-honesty and self-direction most people were never trained to develop. Another reason people remain stuck after 25 is that they confuse knowledge with transformation. They read books, watch videos, listen to podcasts, and collect insights, but very little of it reshapes their behavior. Learning becomes a form of psychological comfort rather than a catalyst for change. It feels productive without being risky. You get the satisfaction of understanding without the vulnerability of applying. Over time, this creates a subtle illusion of growth. You feel smarter, more aware, more informed, but your life looks largely the same. This gap between insight and action slowly erodes self-trust. You begin to doubt your ability to follow through, even though the real issue is not ability, but avoidance. After 25, the consequences of this pattern compound. Each year of unacted knowledge increases internal friction. You know what to do, but you don't do it, and that tension drains confidence. Eventually, people stop aiming for transformation altogether and settle for optimization. They try to feel better instead of becoming better. The next level, however, does not respond to understanding alone. It requires embodiment. It demands that ideas be tested in the real world where they can fail, evolve, or prove insufficient. This is uncomfortable because it exposes limits. But limits are exactly what guide growth. Those who continue advancing after 25 use learning as a tool, not a refuge. They close the loop quickly, learn, act, adjust. They tolerate the discomfort of imperfect execution because they value progress over protection. This willingness to turn insight into action again and again is what quietly separates people who level up from those who remain permanently preparing for a life that never begins. As people move further into adulthood, time itself becomes a psychological trap. After 25, you become more aware of how fast years pass, and this awareness creates pressure rather than clarity. Instead of motivating action, it often leads to paralysis. You start thinking in terms of wasted time and missed chances, which makes every decision feel heavier. The fear of choosing wrong grows stronger than the desire to choose at all. Many people delay action because they want guarantees before committing, but guarantees do not exist at the next level. Progress requires directional movement, not certainty. Ironically, the attempt to protect time often leads to the greatest loss of it. You stay stuck evaluating options while momentum decays. Another shift occurs in how people view effort. After 25, effort is no longer romanticized. It is associated with burnout, stress, and exhaustion, so people aim for balance instead of growth, not realizing that stagnation has its own cost. When life stops expanding, energy drops, meaning fades. This creates a quiet dissatisfaction that is hard to name. The next level demands a reframing of time and effort, not as limited resources to be conserved, but as tools to be invested deliberately. Those who keep evolving stop asking whether something is the perfect use of time and start asking whether it moves them forward, even slightly. This mindset restores momentum. It turns time from an enemy into an ally. And once momentum returns, growth feels possible again, even after years of feeling stuck.